I thought the hardest part of my husband's death would be learning how to live without him. I was wrong. It started 3 days after the funeral. I hadn't slept more than a few hours at a time. The house smelled like lilies and stale coffee, and I hated the silence more than I hated the sympathy calls. I spent my nights restlessly wandering, touching his clothes, staring at the closed door of his office like it might open again. But on that third night, grief turned into something sharper. It was a folder. A slim, gray folder wedged between two manila files in the locked drawer of his desk. I wasn't looking for secrets, I was looking for closure. Or maybe just something to hold on to. But when I pulled it out, I knew it wasn't meant for me. The label on the front said only, Memorial, Personal. At first, I assumed it was his draft of a will, or maybe instructions for how he wanted to be remembered. He'd always been oddly prepared for things, even death. But when I opened it, something didn't fit. There was no mention of me, no references to our home, our friends, not even to his parents. Instead, there were names I didn't recognize. A guest list written in his neat, careful handwriting. A floral arrangement order for a venue I'd never heard of. A printed eulogy labeled Final Version, signed with his initials. My heart sank as I skimmed the opening line. To those who knew me for who I truly was. There was no mention of me in the entire speech. I flipped through page after page. Seating charts, emails, receipts, an event date. 2 days after the funeral I had organized. I stared at it, stunned. The 19th of August, 6 p.m. A different location, a different crowd, a different goodbye. I felt like I was standing at the edge of something enormous and invisible, like the floor beneath me had shifted and no one had warned me. I had buried my husband, and now I was learning that someone else had done the same thing. But I hadn't been invited to that version of the farewell. I closed the folder with trembling hands. My breath caught in my throat. For a moment, I wondered if it was some sort of mistake, maybe a duplicate idea he never followed through with, or something work-related. But even as I thought it, I knew better. The names weren't coworkers. They weren't relatives. They weren't ours. They were someone else's bride. My husband had planned 2 funerals, one for me to grieve the man I thought I knew, and one for who exactly? I stared at the folder for a long time, trying to slow the spin of my thoughts. A dozen memories tried to resurface all at once his last business trip, the number he never let me call, the strange way he avoided making video calls while traveling, the way he had changed in the past year, more reserved, more distant. I had explained it away as stress, exhaustion, grief, over a miscarriage we never really spoke about again. But now I realized something else entirely. He had been preparing to die in 2 separate worlds, and I had only been living in one of them. The question screamed inside my skull, louder than any eulogy. Who was my husband when I wasn't looking? I didn't cry. Not yet. There was no space for tears, only a rising heat in my chest, the kind that comes just before everything you thought was stable begins to split down the middle. The last page of the folder was what truly unhinged me. A thank you letter template, unsigned but clearly written by him, expressing gratitude to a group for sharing his journey, his love, his truth. It ended with, "You were my light, my real family, my safe place. Please remember me as I truly was with you." I read it twice, 3 times. Every word pushed the blade deeper into the idea of the life I thought I had. He had written that for someone else. For a group of people who apparently knew a version of him that I never would. I put the folder back, not because I was done with it, but because I wasn't ready to know more. Not yet. Something told me this was just the beginning, and that whatever came next would unravel everything I thought I knew about the man I had promised to grow old with. Outside, the wind stirred against the windows, as if the night itself was listening. And inside that house, a truth waited for me to open it, one I was never supposed to see. We met in line at a coffee shop during a thunderstorm. It wasn't dramatic. He offered me the last cranberry muffin after seeing me eye it from behind his shoulder. I declined. He insisted. I smiled. He asked for my name and offered to buy my drink. I declined again. He offered a rain jacket instead. That time, I said yes. That was Michael. Persistent, but gentle. Always thoughtful. never too much. The kind of man who asked you about your day and listened with both ears. Who always remembered your mother's birthday. And who could stand in a crowded room and still make you feel like the only one that mattered. I didn't fall in love with him in a flash. It happened slowly, like water rising in a glass you didn't know was empty. We married after 3 years of dating. It was a small ceremony under a sycamore tree in the backyard of my parents' house. I remember how he looked at me when I walked down the aisle like nothing else in the world existed. I clung to that look for years. Every time things felt uncertain, I remembered it, replayed it like a home video. Our marriage wasn't glamorous. It was quiet, simple, steady. We had our routines. Sunday morning breakfasts, crossword puzzles in bed, matching mugs we used until the handles chipped. I worked freelance from home, writing mostly. Michael worked in logistics for a pharmaceutical company, which meant he traveled, sometimes unexpectedly, sometimes for days. But he always called, always texted, always came home. We didn't have children, we tried. The miscarriage was early, just 7 weeks, but it cut deep. I remember him holding me on the bathroom floor, whispering that it wasn't our fault, that it didn't mean the end of anything. But something changed after that. He started pulling away, not completely, but in ways I couldn't explain. He was still present, still loving, still Michael. But there was a wall, like an invisible pane of glass between us. I pressed my hand against it often, trying to get through. And yet, I didn't question it. I thought grief was just messy like that. I thought marriages waxed and waned. We still had good days, trips to the lake house, surprise flowers, evenings spent laughing over wine and old playlists. From the outside, we looked like the couple everyone wanted to be. Friends commented on how strong we were, how grounded. We had photos on the mantle of Italy, Colorado, New York, smiles in every one. But now I look back and realize those smiles were never mine alone. He had another life, one I never saw, one he protected so well that I didn't even know to be suspicious. It wasn't that I trusted too easily. I simply had no reason not to. Michael had never lied to me, at least not in ways I could catch. He was dependable, present. His affection didn't wane. He remembered anniversaries. He cleaned the gutters without being asked. He made dinner on Fridays. He kissed me on the forehead before leaving every morning. We had inside jokes, like naming the squirrels outside or rating bad movie accents. We planned to go to Japan someday, once things settled down. He even started learning basic Japanese, just enough to surprise me, at random. There were no late-night calls from strange numbers, no lipstick on collars, no unexplained charges on the credit card. If anything, he was almost boringly stable. And maybe that's how he got away with it. I don't know what I would have said if someone had told me then that he was living 2 lives. I probably would have laughed, or gotten angry, or asked how they dared question a man who'd been my rock during the hardest years of my life. Michael wasn't perfect, but he was real, solid. The kind of man who would rather lose sleep than let you feel alone in your pain. But that version of Michael was curated. A portrait hung carefully over the cracks in the wall. Now I wonder what his days looked like when he wasn't with me. Where did he go during those longer-than-expected business trips? Who laughed at his jokes when I wasn't there to hear them? Did he talk about me, ever? Did she know about me? I used to think his silences were thoughtful, that his pauses were introspective. Now I fear they were calculations. Still, I can't lie. I loved him. I didn't just love the idea of him, I loved the version of him that sat across from me every night at dinner, who put on jazz records while folding laundry, who left sticky notes with corny puns in my laptop. That man was real, at least to me. Even after the miscarriage, even when he became quieter, we still found ways to connect. We tried couples therapy for a few months. It helped, until he had to travel more. He apologized for missing sessions, promised we'd start again. Life just got busy, and I let it. Because that's what you do when you love someone. You rationalize, you excuse, you fill in the blanks with hope. I filled a lot of blanks for Michael. I told myself he was tired, that he needed space, that his odd behavior wasn't odd at all, just misread. I gave him the benefit of every doubt because I believed in us. I believed in the years we had built, the traditions, the shared passwords, the rituals. I believed he was mine. Now, sitting in this same house, with the same chipped mugs and the same jazz records, I wonder how many parts of my life were staged. How many dinners were eaten with guilt between the bites? How many kisses were goodbyes to someone else? The house is filled with memories that feel both precious and poisoned. The couch we picked out together is still worn on his side. The framed quote, "He bought me," still hangs above the bed. Love is showing up. He showed up. And he also didn't. Sometimes I think back to the night he proposed. It was raining again, full circle, he'd said. He took me back to that same coffee shop and waited until it was empty. He didn't even get on one knee. He just held my hand and asked if I'd stay. Stay through everything? I asked, laughing. Through everything, he said, dead serious. I realized now he meant it, just not in the way I understood. There's something cruel about grief layered on betrayal. You can't mourn properly. You can't be angry cleanly. The pain overlaps in ugly, complicated ways. You want to hate them and hold them at the same time. You want to scream at the sky, but you don't know which God to blame. What we had looked perfect, felt perfect, enough to fool not just others but me. And that's the part that hurts most. The first time I noticed something was off, it was a Wednesday. He was supposed to come home that night from a conference in Chicago, but he texted at 6 p.m. saying his flight was delayed due to weather. I checked the airline's website out of idle concern. There were no weather delays that day. In fact, his flight had landed at 5:45. I waited. I didn't say anything. Maybe he'd explain. Maybe I misread. When he finally walked in at 10 p.m., suitcase in hand, he kissed my cheek and apologized for the craziest airport chaos he'd ever seen. I nodded, smiled, offered to reheat dinner, but my stomach twisted when I asked, which gate was it? And he answered without hesitation, Terminal C. The flight he was supposedly on had landed in Terminal B. It was a small detail. So small, I almost convinced myself it didn't matter. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe the airline website was wrong. Maybe I should have just trusted him. I should have asked more questions. But I didn't. Because it wasn't just one lie, it was a pattern I refused to name. There were always these small slips. The mysterious number that called late at night, which he claimed was a vendor. The brief flashes of panic when I picked up his phone by mistake. The way he started keeping his laptop password protected even though he used to joke that we had no secrets. He traveled more that year. Each trip had a purpose, a merger, a regional meeting, a crisis in logistics. And each time, he packed lighter, faster, more rehearsed. He used to hate packing. Now it was second nature. I asked once if he was overwhelmed. He smiled, kissed my forehead, said, "I've got it handled." He always said that. He had everything handled. But I began to notice how often he looked tired after trips, tired in a different way. Not physically, but emotionally. As if he'd been somewhere heavy, somewhere that took more out of him than meetings and hotels should. Then there was the perfume. It wasn't mine. It wasn't strong. But it clung to his collar the night he got home early from what he called a canceled meeting in Austin. He said he had dinner with a vendor, a woman he'd mentioned before, one I had never met. He said she hugged him goodbye, said it was just a business thing, a European habit. But it wasn't European perfume. It was vanilla musk and something floral I couldn't place. Not what you wear to a vendor dinner. I remember folding that shirt days later, holding it in my hands like it might confess something. Instead, it just sat there, soft and silent, like the rest of his wardrobe. Another time, I asked him to send me a photo from his hotel room, just a silly request, a miss you moment. He said sure, and a minute later, I received a photo of a bed, a desk, a room service tray, but the timestamp on the image said 2:14 p.m. He had told me he was just waking up when I texted. I told myself the timestamp was wrong. That became a habit of mine, explaining away what didn't make sense. I grew skilled at it. The lipstick on the napkin in his coat pocket, a client's wife. The unfamiliar email address that popped up on the iPad he left unlocked, a customer support account. The second credit card statement he said was company use only. I didn't even check it. I trusted the surface because the surface had always been so smooth. He had his rituals. Every morning, coffee with oat milk. Every evening, 10 push-ups before bed. When he was home, he was present. He asked about my writing. He rubbed my back without being asked. He cooked on weekends. But it was the absences that started to whisper louder than the presence. He began declining invitations to my family gatherings, citing work stress. He stopped asking about my deadlines. He forgot our third attempt at scheduling a weekend getaway, the one I was secretly hoping would help us reconnect. Once, I found a receipt in his wallet for a necklace I had never received. When I asked, he said it was a returned item, that he hadn't liked it once he saw it in person. Said he meant to tell me. It was a lie I accepted because it was easier than wondering who the necklace was for. In hindsight, there were so many signs. A man doesn't vanish and reappear that seamlessly unless he's practiced at it. Michael was careful, but not perfect. I just wasn't paying attention, or maybe I was, and chose not to see. I told myself all couples drift, that sometimes intimacy fades, that work consumes, that life interrupts, that grief over a lost pregnancy can shift even the best of us. But in truth, I ignored the patterns because I feared what they pointed to. Every time I felt the coldness between us, I warmed it with memories. The proposal, the lake house, the time he stayed up all night helping me finish an article I was too stressed to write. I clung to those memories like anchors, afraid that if I let go, I'd float into something much darker. But darkness was coming either way. I remember one night, not long before his accident, we were watching a movie. He sat beside me but didn't touch me. His phone buzzed once. He glanced at it, turned it face down. I didn't ask. I looked at the television, but I wasn't watching anymore. He reached over, took my hand, held it loosely, said, "You know I love you, right?" I nodded, surprised by the suddenness of it. "Of course." He smiled, a half smile. Then he turned back to the screen, but his eyes looked far away. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling and wondered if that was a goodbye in disguise. Now, I think it was. I didn't just ignore the patterns. I trained myself not to see them. Like someone living next to train tracks who learns to sleep through the sound, I numbed myself to protect what I thought was real. But the silence after his death is different. It doesn't feel peaceful. It feels loaded. Like there are voices in the walls, in the dust on his desk, in the photos we took together. Whispers of another life. Now, every missed call, every delay, every vague explanation replays in my head with painful clarity. It's not just what I didn't see. It's what I saw and excused. I didn't open the folder again until 2 days after I found it. I had tucked it back into the drawer like it might disappear on its own, like maybe I had imagined the whole thing. But grief doesn't work that way. Neither does truth. It festers in silence. And the longer I let it sit, the heavier it became until I could no longer breathe around it. So I waited until the house was empty. No casseroles being delivered. No friends checking in. No calls from family asking how I was holding up. Just silence and that gray folder, waiting like a sealed confession. I placed it on the dining table, where we used to play cards and eat takeout. I turned off the music, shut the windows, made the world as quiet as possible. Then I opened it. The first document was a speech, titled Celebration of Life, Final Draft. I read the first paragraph 3 times before it sank in. It wasn't the words, it was what was missing. My name, my presence, my life with him. Instead, the speech spoke of laughter in a different kitchen, of inside jokes I'd never heard, of shared dreams that didn't belong to me. He wrote, "She made me feel like I could finally exhale. With her, I was allowed to be who I was, not who the world wanted me to be." I stopped reading. I wasn't sure if I was going to cry or vomit or scream, but I kept going. The next page was a floral arrangement order. Elegant, understated, expensive. Peonies, his favorite. But he'd always said he hated flowers at funerals. "They're for the living," he used to say, "and I won't be around to appreciate them." The date on the order was the 12th of August, 2 weeks before he died. He'd planned the event before his accident. There was an itemized guest list, 42 names. I scanned it quickly, not recognizing a single one. No co-workers, no extended family, just Strangers. One name, though, repeated itself. Claire G. She was the main contact for the venue, the caterer, the eulogy draft. Claire. My heart skipped. There was a group photo attached to one of the emails he'd printed. Claire, standing with her arm around Michael, both smiling at the camera like they had just shared a joke. She was pretty, not younger than me, not older. Brown hair, kind eyes, a face that would make you feel safe in an unfamiliar place. The photo was dated the 4th of January, the day he told me he was snowed in at a hotel during a logistics conference in Boston. I remembered calling him that night. He said he missed me. He was smiling beside her when I said those words into a phone he never really answered anymore. I moved on, slowly, numbly. There were receipts, travel itineraries, car rentals. One stood out, a 4-night Airbnb reservation at a cabin in Vermont. It was marked private booking, no host interaction. The email confirmation included a note. For our quiet weekend together, no distractions, just you and me. He booked it for the weekend after our anniversary. He had told me he had to work a crisis shift, something about an urgent recall. That weekend, I had dinner alone, watched a movie by myself, and told myself it was fine. He was providing, he was responsible, he loved me. He was in a cabin with her. The next document hit harder. It was an email chain between him and an attorney dated over the past year. It discussed estate planning, but none of the documents included me. The primary beneficiary listed was Claire G., along with a minor dependent referred to only by initials. A child. I stopped reading. I stared at the name for a full minute. My body went cold. My husband had a child. He had a will that didn't include me, and he had gone through legal channels to make sure that when he was gone, they were protected, not me. I reached for my water glass and missed, knocking it over. The crash startled me, made it real. I bent to pick it up, hands shaking, and when I rose, I saw the next page had a drawing on it, crayon lines on white printer paper. A child's drawing. It was labeled in crooked handwriting, "Me and Daddy." Stick figures stood beside a house with flowers and a swing set. The taller figure had a tie. The smaller one had pigtails. My husband had a daughter. He never told me, never hinted, never slipped. How long had she existed? Was she born after our miscarriage? Or before? Did he hold her in his arms while I cried myself to sleep beside an empty crib? I flipped the page. There was another picture. This one of a cake pink frosting, candles, a birthday party, and in the corner Michael holding a girl maybe 5 or 6 years old while she kissed his cheek. He was wearing the same sweater he wore when he told me he had food poisoning in Chicago and had to cancel dinner plans with me. Every alibi now felt like a knife. The documents blurred in front of my eyes. I kept turning pages, and each one hurt more than the last. Insurance policies with updated beneficiaries. Letters of recommendation he'd written for Claire to use at her new job. A photo of them together on a beach. The caption on the back read, "Our last summer together, but the best one." I couldn't feel my hands. I read a printout of a text exchange. Claire, do you think she suspects anything? Michael, number, she still believes I'm hers. I dropped the page. I pressed my palms into my face and tried to inhale something other than pain. What kind of man crafts 2 lives so perfectly? What kind of husband kisses one woman goodbye and drives to another child's birthday party? What kind of love is so deliberate in its deceit? My mind kept flashing to all the times he said he was tired, all the times he didn't want to make love, all the times he bought flowers randomly, as if washing guilt off his hands. I thought I was grieving the man I loved. Now I was grieving a lie. The final item in the folder was a sealed envelope labeled, "To be given only if asked." I stared at it for a long time. I broke the seal. Inside was a letter, handwritten. "If you're reading this, I didn't get the chance to explain. I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. I wanted to protect what was good in both parts of my life. Maybe that was selfish. Maybe I was weak. But I did love you. Just not completely. Not like I loved her. I hope you never find this." I folded the letter back up. I sat in silence for what felt like hours. Outside, a bird chirped like nothing had changed. But inside, everything had. I had opened the folder, looking for answers. What I found was a funeral I was never meant to attend, a life I was never supposed to discover. I couldn't stop staring at the photograph. Claire, smiling beside him, her hand resting lightly on his chest. His body leaned into hers like it had done 1,000 times. That kind of ease, that kind of muscle memory, it doesn't come from lies. It comes from a life shared in the open. Not with me. She had soft eyes, a confident tilt of the chin. Her expression was the kind you wear when you know where you stand in someone's life. The longer I looked at her, the more something itched at the back of my mind. She didn't feel like a stranger. There was something too familiar in the shape of her mouth, the way she held her shoulders relaxed but poised, like she'd been taught how to carry herself for an audience. I opened a browser on my phone and searched her name, Claire Garrison. Nothing came up in the first few results that matched her face. A few LinkedIn profiles, a handful of Facebook pages. Then, on the fourth scroll, I stopped. There she was. Same brown hair, shorter then, holding a wine glass at a company holiday party, tagged beside Michael. The caption read, "Back when logistics had a soul. Miss this team?" The photo was 5 years old. They worked together. I clicked through more posts. Pictures at charity runs, office birthdays, a group shot from a retreat, all wearing matching team shirts. Claire and Michael stood side by side in every one. The timeline didn't lie. They had known each other for at least 7 years. I remembered him talking about work stress during that period. I remembered him saying the new hire in his department was sharp, but a bit intense. Said she was good at managing chaos. I never heard the name Claire, but now I realized I had heard it, just never in full, never in context. Once, at a company Christmas party, he introduced me to someone briefly. "This is Claire, from operations." She wore red that night. She smiled politely, then disappeared to the bar. I never saw her again. Until now. I stood up from the table so fast my chair scraped against the hardwood. The air in the room was too thick. I paced in slow circles, piecing it all together. I was the one he brought to official events. Claire was the one he brought to everything else. She wasn't just a mistress. She was someone who had been in my orbit the whole time. My mind raced back to the drawing, the little girl with the pigtails. Me and Daddy. The child he never told me about. Had Claire been pregnant while I miscarried? Had I brushed shoulders with a woman carrying my husband's child and never known? The nausea came fast this time. I rushed to the sink and emptied the little that was in me. Cold sweat clung to the back of my neck. I gripped the edge of the counter until the wave passed. Then I looked up at the fridge. A photo of me and Michael, taken at a friend's wedding 2 years ago. We looked happy. Real. He was kissing my temple, and I was laughing. That wedding had taken place 2 weeks after a work retreat. The same retreat where, in another photo I just found online, Claire and Michael were arm in arm, grinning like newlyweds. I yanked the picture off the fridge and threw it across the room. It wasn't just betrayal. It was layered, calculated, intimate. I returned to the dining table and pulled out the envelope from earlier, the one addressed, "To be given only if asked." The letter inside, now smoothed and creased, burned in my hands. He wrote, "I did love her, just not completely, not like I loved her." That sentence played on repeat in my head. I did love her, just not completely. How do you measure a partial love? How do you categorize years of affection that came with caveats? I needed to see her again, not just in photos. In real life, I searched the event venue listed in the folder, the one where his other memorial had taken place. They had a public gallery online. I clicked through. There, under events, the 19th of August, I found it. A photo album titled, "A Life Remembered, MG." I clicked. My breath stopped. Claire stood in the center of a modest room, dressed in navy, holding a young girl who clutched a small stuffed elephant. Michael had given me that same elephant on our 5th anniversary, said he found it in a random store, thought it looked like us. The girl was maybe 6. She had his eyes. There were more photos, a video snippet of the eulogy. Claire speaking, her voice calm but trembling. He was never just mine. He belonged to the world. But the part he gave to me, that part was everything. The audience was composed of people I had never seen. No mutual friends, no co-workers I knew, a full world that I had never been invited into. That's when I saw it, something that knocked the wind from me harder than anything else. In the corner of the room, framed on a small memorial table, was a photograph I had taken. It was of Michael, sitting on the back porch, drinking coffee, sunlight in his eyes. I'd snapped it one morning, years ago, while he read the paper and hummed Sinatra. I remembered showing him the picture. He said it was the only time he'd ever liked a photo of himself. He had given it to her. He had taken something from our life and used it in hers. My knees gave out. I sank to the floor, folder clutched to my chest like a shield against the weight of everything I'd just learned. I wasn't mourning a man anymore. I was mourning the story I thought we'd written together. And I was realizing, slowly, painfully, that I had only ever been a footnote in someone else's chapter. Something inside me fractured the day I saw that child's face. Not the kind of break that leaves you in pieces on the floor, no. This was cleaner, sharper, like a crack through glass just before it shatters. And instead of crying, I went still. Grief had shaped me into something soft, but betrayal carved out the softness and left behind someone new. Someone he would not have recognized. Someone who didn't flinch at the truth anymore. I started with his email, not the one I used to help manage, the one filled with flight confirmations and grocery coupons. The other one, the one I'd only seen by accident, years ago, when he was updating his phone. It had stuck with me, an old college address, something he claimed he never used anymore. But I remembered the domain, the shape of it. I reset the password. His security question was easy. What was your first car? He used the same answer for everything. Inside the inbox was a life I had never seen. Hundreds of emails with Claire, dozens with event planners, Google Drive folders titled Q3 Planning, filled with personal vacation photos, and one thread with his lawyer, negotiating the logistics of shifting funds from our joint savings account into a private trust named after their daughter. He had moved money, not just a little, tens of thousands. The numbers made my chest go tight. But I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I made screenshots. I forwarded documents to a secure folder I created for myself, one he would have never found. I labeled everything meticulously. Dates, amounts, correspondence. I even made a spreadsheet. That's when I realized I wasn't acting like a betrayed widow anymore. I was gathering evidence. I requested our joint bank records. I went to the bank in person, pretended I was doing routine estate checks. I smiled at the teller. She smiled back. No one suspected I was digging through the ruins of my marriage with surgical precision. He'd opened a second account. I found the statements. $2,400 a month to CG Trust. $800 to a school tuition fund. $110 monthly to a recurring out-of-network medical provider listed under Claire's zip code. He had built a second home with meticulous care. Brick by brick, transfer by transfer, lie by lie. I opened our filing cabinet, dug through his folders, found an envelope taped to the bottom of a drawer. Inside was a flash drive. I plugged it into my laptop with hands so calm it scared me. It held videos. Not of us. Of them, Claire laughing while baking with their daughter, Michael reading a bedtime story, the child curled against his chest. A vacation clip, the three of them playing in the snow, throwing powder into the air like confetti. A selfie, Michael kissing Claire's cheek, the child between them holding the camera. They looked like a family. I looked like a ghost. I copied the entire drive. The next morning, I called a lawyer. Not the one who handled our will, a new one, a sharp one, someone whose reviews used words like relentless and surgical. I met with her 2 days later. I laid out everything, the documents, the statements, the photos, the emails. She didn't blink. When I finished, she looked me in the eye and said, "You know this isn't just betrayal. This is misrepresentation, financial fraud, possibly more." I nodded. "I don't want revenge," I told her. "I want the truth to mean something." She understood. Together, we began preparing to challenge the will. Yes, he'd left everything to Claire and the child, but we were still legally married. He'd signed certain documents without full disclosure. There were legal angles. We found them. I started speaking less to the people around me. Friends called, I let it ring. Family checked in, I replied with one-word texts. I couldn't share this yet. Not while I was still building the framework for what would come next. I became methodical. I went through our photo albums and labeled the years he had been living the double life. I cross-referenced business trips with hotel records, pulled credit card statements going back 6 years. The deeper I went, the clearer it all became. He had started with small things. A weekend retreat, a shared Uber, a kiss maybe, after a late dinner. And then, it grew. By the time I noticed the cracks, he had already built another home inside them. And yet despite all that, he still came back to me, ate dinner with me, made love to me, slept in our bed. What kind of person lives like that? I didn't ask that question to hurt myself. I asked it because I needed to understand the level of compartmentalization, the mental gymnastics it takes to stand in two lives and lie to both. He wasn't a monster. That was the part that hurt the most. He was kind, warm, generous, and he was a coward. He didn't want to choose, so he didn't. He let both women believe they were the one, while privately preparing for one of them to lose everything. I refused to be the one left in the rubble. The lawyer helped me write a letter. It wasn't a lawsuit. Not yet. It was a declaration of intention, a formal request for estate mediation, naming Claire, the child, and Michael's lawyer. It included copies of the evidence. I mailed it, certified. Then I waited. I didn't want confrontation. I wanted acknowledgement. I didn't need money. I needed the record set straight. This wasn't vengeance. This was reclamation of my life, my story, my role in a narrative I never asked to be in. As I waited for a reply, I continued preparing. I rewrote my will. I transferred funds out of shared assets. I sold his car. I cleaned the house of every item he hadn't touched in the last year. I kept the photo he loved, the one I took on the back porch. But I removed the frame and wrote on the back, "You used to smile like that for me. Until you didn't." Then I placed it in the drawer, with the folder that had started it all. By the end of the week, I received an email from Claire. The subject line was one word: why. I didn't open it. Not yet. I would, eventually. But on my terms. Not hers. Because, for the first time since he died, I didn't feel like I was drowning in the truth. I was standing on it. I didn't pack everything. Just what mattered. Just what belonged to me. And only me. One suitcase. One duffel. A folder of documents. A flash drive of evidence. A worn journal I hadn't written in for years. And the mug he bought me on our second anniversary, the one that said "Still Yours." I kept it not because of what it said, but because of how much that phrase had changed. I waited until the morning light spilled across the living room, soft and golden. The kind of light that makes you want to stay a little longer. That was the point. I wanted to feel it one last time and still walk away. There was no one to say goodbye to. No friends coming by. No neighbors waving through the window. The house was still, clean, empty, in a way that felt intentional. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, my bedroom now, and looked at the bed we'd shared. I had already stripped the sheets, folded them tightly. The mattress looked foreign without the creases of habit. I left a letter on the nightstand. It wasn't poetic. It wasn't angry. It simply said, "I loved you in good faith. You lived in bad faith. This house is no longer ours. I am no longer yours." On. I placed my keys on the kitchen counter. One for the front door, one for the mailbox, one for the garage that held a car I'd already sold. Then I unplugged the Wi-Fi router, canceled the security system, deactivated the smart locks. Every system that once tethered me to this house was slowly going dark. I walked through each room like I was closing a chapter. Not with tears, not with nostalgia, but with clarity. I paused at the photos still on the walls, not because I wanted to keep them, but to remember which ones I would destroy later. A form of editing, erasure. In the living room, I left one photo on the table. The three of us, me, him, and his mother. Taken at Thanksgiving 3 years ago. I turned it face down. Let someone else decide what it meant. At 9:15 a.m., I wheeled my suitcase out the front door. The wind stirred gently. Birds chirped without irony. The world had not changed. Even if I had, I didn't look back. Not because I was brave, but because looking back meant giving him one more second of my attention, and he'd had too many already. I drove east. I had no final destination, just a rental cabin I'd found online, nestled by a lake he'd never taken me to. I chose it because it was the opposite of what we'd shared. No memories, no overlap. A place that felt like mine, untouched by his shadow. On the way there, I stopped for gas. The attendant smiled, asked where I was headed. I said, away. He nodded like he understood. I turned off my phone for the rest of the drive. No more updates. No more condolences. No more missed calls from people who didn't know half the story. When I arrived, the lake was still, mirror flat. I stood at the edge and stared at the reflection for a long time, not because I was looking for answers, but because I was finally quiet enough inside to see myself. I made tea that night, Saturday on the porch, opened the journal I hadn't touched since the miscarriage. The last entry had been hopeful. It hurt to read it, so I wrote a new one. Today I left a house that never truly belonged to me. I left a marriage that ended before I knew it was over. I left a man who split himself in two and gave me the smaller half. I am not broken. I am unrecognizable only to the version of me who stayed silent too long. I closed the journal, set it beside my mug. That night, I slept soundly for the first time in months. Not because everything was fixed, but because I had finally moved. The email came 1 week after I left. Subject line, Michael's letter. It was from his lawyer. I hesitated before opening it. I already knew too much. What more could he possibly say that I hadn't already discovered on my own? Still, curiosity has its own gravity, especially when it drags you towards something you once loved. The message was brief. As part of Mr. Garrison's posthumous estate instructions, you were designated to receive the following file. It was scheduled for delivery upon confirmation of beneficiary conflict. Please let me know if you'd prefer not to receive any future items. Attached was a video file, titled simply, For Her, Private. I downloaded it in silence, watched as it buffered. Then I pressed play. The screen lit up with Michael's face. He looked tired, older than I remembered. The lighting was dim, probably a hotel room or a study. His tie was loosened. His eyes were heavy. He didn't smile. He began without preamble. If you're watching this, he said slowly, then I failed. I failed to protect both of you. He looked down for a moment, gathered himself, then looked back at the lens. I never meant to live two lives. That wasn't the plan. It just happened. I know how pathetic that sounds. I know it's not enough. My breath was shallow. He went on. I loved you. I loved her. I know people say that's not possible, that it's selfish, but I lived it. And I lived it badly. I lied. I hurt you. And you didn't deserve it. Not once. I paused the video. Let the silence settle around me like a weight. Then I hit play again. You were my compass, he said. You were the one who kept me steady. Claire was the wind, and I let myself be pulled in both directions. He sighed, rubbed his eyes. I thought I could manage it, that as long as I gave enough to each of you, no one would really suffer. But that was a fantasy, a coward solution. Another pause. You would have made a great mother. That one hit harder than the rest. He blinked quickly, looked away from the camera. After the miscarriage, I didn't know how to reach you. I felt like a stranger in my own home. So I looked for escape, for comfort, and I found it. I clenched my fists, because he wasn't describing regret. He was describing justification. The language of a man who wanted to be understood more than he wanted to be forgiven. The video continued. I planned to tell you. I thought I'd come clean after the next holiday, or your birthday, or some moment when I could frame it right. But I kept pushing it. I told myself I was protecting you. He laughed bitterly. That's the lie we tell, isn't it? That silence is mercy. He leaned in closer to the camera. If I could do it over, I'd choose honesty. But I can't. All I can say is, you were the better part of me, even if I didn't act like it. The screen went dark. That was it. No goodbye. No, I love you. Just the smudge of a man trying to reshape the mess he left behind. I stared at the blank screen for a long time. Then I deleted the file. I didn't need his version of the story, because He'd already written it without me for years. 2 days later, another envelope arrived. This one wasn't from a lawyer. It was handwritten. No return address. Inside was a letter. It was from Claire. Asterisk. I didn't know about you for the first 2 years, she wrote. I thought I was the only one. When I found out, I almost left. But he said he was ending things with you. He swore he was staying for financial reasons only, that your marriage had been over for years. She went on. I believed him. Maybe because I wanted to. Maybe because he was good at lying. But I let him keep going. I let him split himself between us, and I pretended it would end in my favor. There was no apology in her words. Only recognition. She concluded with one line. I hope you find peace before I do. I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer with the others. I didn't need closure from either of them. Not anymore. Because closure isn't a gift someone gives you. It's a wall you build yourself brick by painful brick, until you've finally sealed the exit behind the person who set fire to the floor. He tried to rewrite the story, but I'd already started writing my own. I didn't plan to see her again. But life has a way of folding people back into your path just when you think you've cleared the road. It happened at the courthouse. I was finalizing the estate petition with my lawyer. A routine procedural appearance. No drama, no headlines, just signatures and silence. Then, as I stepped into the hallway, I saw her. Claire. She stood near the vending machine, holding a file in one hand, her purse slung tight across her body like armor. She looked thinner than the photos, more tired, real. Her eyes met mine. She didn't move. Neither did I. But she spoke first. I didn't expect to see you here. Her voice was smaller than I remembered from the eulogy video. Less composed. Not sharp, but dull with wear. I didn't expect to see you at all, I replied. A beat of silence. Then, do you have a moment? I didn't want to, but something in me, curiosity, closure, cruelty, I'm not sure, nodded. We sat on a cold bench near the exit. Two women bound by a man who'd cut us both in half. She didn't look at me when she started talking. He never told me how bad it was with you, she said. I laughed once, sharp and joyless. There was nothing bad, I said. That's what made it worse. Claire flinched, then nodded. I used to think I won, she said. That he chose me, that he stayed with you out of guilt or convenience. But now I see, we were both placeholders, for the parts of himself he couldn't reconcile. It was the first thing she'd said that didn't make me want to stand up and walk away. He was different with me, she went on. Softer, less guarded. But maybe that's because I never knew the whole man, just the half he gave me. I said nothing. She turned to face me then, her eyes red, but dry. I'm not here to ask for forgiveness. I wouldn't know what to do with it if you gave it. Good, I said flatly. She exhaled. I just wanted to tell you, I think you were the one he loved with fear, and that's why he ran. That sentence stayed with me long after she left. Loved with fear. I walked out of the courthouse a few minutes later. My lawyer called after me, asking about follow-ups. I waved her off. Outside, the sky was turning, blue to gray, a storm edging in. I got in the car and sat with the engine off. I thought about all the versions of closure I'd imagined. Confrontations, confessions, someone crying. I used to think healing had to be loud, final, a door slamming shut. But real closure? It's Keter. It's when the echo stops. That evening, back at the cabin, I lit a fire. Saturday on the floor with a box I hadn't opened since I left the house. It held the last remnants of him, photos, notes, the ring he gave me. I took each item out, held it, let myself feel whatever came. Some made me smile, some made me burn. Then I lit a match. One by one, I fed each piece into the fire. The photo from Rome, the concert tickets, the anniversary card where he wrote, always, no matter what. Especially that one. I kept the ring for last. It didn't tremble in my hand. Neither did I. I whispered a single sentence into the flames as I dropped it in. You don't get to have the last word. The metal hissed. And then, it was done. I didn't know what to do with freedom at first. It felt strange, empty, like stepping into a room stripped of all its furniture. I kept reaching for walls that weren't there anymore, kept bracing for impact that never came. But slowly, the quiet became less frightening. It became space, possibility. I stayed at the lake cabin for 3 more weeks. No one knew where I was except my lawyer. I let the world carry on without me, and I didn't check in. For the first time in years, I had nothing to hide from and no one to keep up appearances for. Some mornings, I walked barefoot down to the water with coffee in hand. The lake mirrored the sky in a way that made me feel small in the right way, like I didn't have to hold everything together anymore. Some nights, I cried. Not because I missed him, those tears had dried long ago, but because I missed the version of myself who had once believed so fully in love, in loyalty, in shared futures. I wasn't mourning him. I was mourning me. The girl who planned vacations with color-coded spreadsheets. The woman who stayed up late organizing anniversary surprises. The partner who kept believing that effort was enough. But in those quiet weeks, I met someone new. She was still me, but leaner, sharper, quieter in the right places. She liked her coffee black now. She didn't fill silences with nervous laughter. She no longer apologized for needing space. I made a list on the back of a receipt one morning. It was titled, "What I Want Next." It wasn't long. A new apartment with no shared furniture. A job that challenges me. Friends who ask twice when I say, "I'm fine." No secrets. No crumbs. No more halves. It wasn't a revenge list. It wasn't about becoming harder. Just truer. I emailed a landlord in the city the next day. Put a deposit down on a small one-bedroom near a bookstore and a flower shop. I'd always wanted to live near both. When I moved in, I brought only what mattered. Books, art, a few kitchen items. No photos of him. No mementos. No ghosts. I painted one wall navy blue just because I could. I started writing again. Not about him. Not even about what happened. I wrote fiction. Bad fiction at first. But it felt like oxygen after holding my breath for too long. People ask me now, sometimes, if I've moved on, as if healing is a finish line. I tell them I've moved through. I've walked through every part of that pain. I've stood in the fire and refused to burn the parts of myself that still believed in better. I don't date yet. I don't plan to. Not until I feel like company would add to me, not repair me. But I do smile at strangers again. I say yes to invitations without checking if someone else would want me to go. I buy flowers for myself on Wednesdays. And I've stopped waiting for apologies that will never come. The world didn't fall apart when he died. It fell apart when I found out who he really was. But now I see that collapse made space. For something new. For someone new. Me. Last sentence. My future plan finally includes me. And that's the only promise I need now.